This video is part 5 of the series Gift of the Nile. In this video, we will be discussing Egyptian religion. Now, the Egyptians were polytheistic. They believed in multiple gods. I don't know if multiple fully describes it. They believed in over 170 gods and goddesses. They believed that there were gods everywhere for just about everything. And each of these gods had an animal associated with it, so every part of their daily life, all day, every day, was a religious experience. Now, some of their key gods. Amun-Ra. This was their key god of the universe, the creation god, that when you read their creation story, you see Amun-Ra at the heart of it and is the key kind of almost Zeus-like figure in their pantheon. You see Osiris. This is the god of the underworld, and we'll discuss more about Osiris in a little bit. You have Horus. He's the god of the sun and the god of war, and a very important god in their society. And then you have Isis. She is the goddess of mothers, of wives, of nature, and has a very magical essence to her. She is also the goddess of the throne, which you see at the top of her head. Her basically headdress is like the throne of the pharaohs. Now, it is also believed that the pharaohs are her children. So, when the pharaoh is in charge, you aren't just having to worry about the pharaoh being just powerful. He's in essence the son of Isis, and you want to make sure that Isis is kept happy. Now, as we said before, the gods were everywhere and a part of all things. So the Egyptians were heavily religious and believed that appeasing the gods were super important to their success as a society. Each god was represented by an animal, and many of the traits and attributes of those animals were given or associated with the gods. So the ones like Horus has an eagle's head. The eagles or the hawks were hunter birds, so the attributes of those predatory birds were given to Horus, and with being the god of war, you see how that works. So all of these animals were sacred. You couldn't just go around killing just for killing's sake. There were certain animals you were allowed to kill for certain reasons. There were other ones that it was considered wrong or demeaning and would anger the gods if they were killed. While others of them, like say for example dogs or canines, they only hung around mainly where the tombs were. So there was an association with the dogs being protectors and guiders with the underworld, while you had cats who were viewed as being, I don't call them servants of the underworld, but they had a strong spiritual essence as well. Many accuse the Egyptian culture as being a culture of death, that so many things about their life were preparing them for their death, when really their life was more a preparation for their afterlife. And as we'll find out, if you didn't lay a certain groundwork or foundation in your life, it could put your afterlife at risk or in jeopardy. So, speaking to that, you have the Book of the Dead. This is one of the oldest religious books in the world. This text is over 4,000 years old. And it basically contains spells to help a person get to what was known as the Field of Reeds, also known as Paradise. To our monotheistic cultures, we'd refer to this as heaven. These would be scrolls that would be 78 feet long and would be written for any person who could afford to have them. Now, in the Old Kingdom, this was a rite and ritual just for the pharaohs, but as you see in the Middle and New Kingdoms, basically those that had money could purchase a Book of the Dead that would have their name in it, that would have their hieroglyphic pictures in it, that would then help them along this trip. Now, the Book of the Dead was important because once you died, there were demons or challenges that you faced that threatened your soul, and you needed these spells to be able to help you get past these challenges, to overcome these demons, to help you get to this paradise. Now, they also believed that the hieroglyphics were magical, that upon your death, you were buried with the scroll, and that these hieroglyphics literally came alive. And they believed this so much that in parts where they had to draw in pictures of one of their most deadly snakes, they actually draw him cut in half. So that way, when the hieroglyphics would come alive, it, that serpent wouldn't in turn fully threaten this soul trying to make its way through the afterlife. So, hieroglyphics, the Book of the Dead, had very strong implications for your afterlife. Now, what would be the steps to getting to paradise? The first step was, well, dying. And once you were dead, your body was to be mummified, as in they would remove certain organs, they would wrap it and prepare it in certain wrappings. There'd be a sarcophagus or outer shell that your body would be buried in, and then you'd be buried with your Book of the Dead. That if you're rich enough to be fully properly mummified and buried, you would want to make sure you had the Book of the Dead. Now, before they put the Book of the Dead in your sarcophagus, they would put what was known as the heart scarab on your chest. This was this beetle-shaped object that had written on the back of it a number of things that would come to play a very key role later. The second step was the reawakening and the opening of the mouth. This is once the person was dead, their soul would come alive again, only this time in the underworld or in the spiritual world, and the god Ptah would go about the business of reopening the mouth, the nose, and the eyes, allowing the soul to be able to experience all the physical things and use all their senses like they did when they were alive. Then began the difficult journey, fighting all kinds of supernatural creatures and bugs that would eat your soul, and all of these other really just fascinating and I don't want to call over the top, but very imaginative and powerful essences that were trying to keep you from getting to your final destination of paradise. This is where all those spells would come in from your Book of the Dead, which is why it was so important, because without the Book of the Dead, you had no hope of overcoming all of these many challenges and obstacles. If you get through all these obstacles and make it past all of those demons and soul-eating bugs, you would come to the Hall of Judgments. That, in this piece of papyrus, is depicted up here. And this is where you'd face the 42 negative confessions. Basically, these were gods or supernatural creatures. There were 42 of them in front of 42 doors. And you must deny committing whatever particular sin it was that God represented. And these gods had pretty terrifying names, like the Breaker of Bones, the Swallower of Spirits. These weren't supernatural creatures, to be messed with. And if you gave an improper answer, then they would be the breaker of your bones and the swallower of your spirit. You would not go on, and your life would either cease to exist, come to an end, or you would be stuck in this journey, or basically like a purgatory forever and ever. Definitely not something an Egyptian would want. So, these sins that they would have to be saying they didn't commit were like, I didn't murder, I didn't steal, I didn't lie, I didn't commit adultery. Now, these people weren't perfect. It's not like they were living in a culture that was this state of moral perfection. But this book of spells, this Book of the Dead, would help make up for the areas that their natural life had fallen short, and kind of help clean the slate in order to help them make it through to the field of reeds. Now, when you got to Osiris, there was the weighing of the heart. This is where you would take that beetle, that heart scarab, and be put on the scale, and it would be weighed against a feather from the goddess Mayat. She was the goddess of truth and the goddess of justice, and it must come to a perfectly even balance. If it proved to be too light or too heavy, you would find yourself at the mercy of this creature over here, which was a combination of alligator, lion, and hippo, whose job it was to eat your soul if your heart was out of balance, and thus would be the end of your life, basically a second death. So, your heart either balanced perfectly and went on to the field of reeds and an endless paradise that was eerily similar to, oh, I don't know, life along the Nile, or you would find yourself being eaten by this ferocious monster that was this lion, alligator, hippo combination, basically the fiercest of the animals in the Egyptian world, merged together, ending your life and ending all hope of happiness or existence. So this was the afterlife process that the Egyptians lived their life trying to prepare for. And in many ways, while some say that this was a culture that promoted, I don't want to say promoted death, but focused on death, really, it was how do I live my life in such a way that I can be right balance, that can be ready to face all of these 42 people that I have to confess in front of, and to have my heart ready to be balanced against Mayat's feather, so that way I can be in the best position to enter paradise. Now, the rich and the powerful were able to afford these scrolls and able to get the mummification and all the necessary things to be able to enter this paradise. If you were not so wealthy, then you could not afford this book of spells, and you would find that poor people got buried outside of the tombs of rich people in hopes that somehow their soul could kind of sneak in along with the rich person's and maybe could find its way, or at least have some chance of an eternal happiness, as opposed to the alternative, which the alternative was basically doing the God's bidding, doing hard slave labor for eternity. And that was a less appeasing option. Now, for those who were rich, they had these little dolls that they were buried with that basically when the gods would ask them to do stuff, these little dolls would come alive and do all the slave work, so that way they would have the opportunity to follow this path and try to get to the field of reeds.